Okay, so before I introduce our speaker, let me just say something small about her. So, with that, this is a pleasure to introduce our speaker, Lucienne Cooper. Lucienne is a passionate advocate for Down syndrome, inspired by her son, Billy, who is now 16 years old. She founded a Down syndrome support group in Scotland and served a trust for the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, helping to amplify the voices of individuals with Down syndrome at the national level. She is also been part of the Down Syndrome UK since its inspection and currently works as the healthcare training manager, a role she is deeply committed to. Through her work, Lucienne is dedicated to improving how families receive a Down syndrome diagnosis, ensuring they are given accurate, supportive, and compassionate information throughout their maternal or maternity journey. So with that, I welcome Lucienne to take us through beyond screening, personalized antenatal support, following a diagnosis of a Down syndrome. So, my people, let's welcome Lucienne. Lucienne, please, you are welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Abigail. Thanks, Abigail. This has been really good fun so far. I've really enjoyed seeing where you're all from. And happy International Day of the Midwife to you all. This is very exciting. Thank you so much for having me here today. So thanks for that great introduction. So if we go to the next slide, that would be great. Excellent, thank you. So this is just me. As Abigail myself. Okay,
Sorry, I
can you
muted you accidentally.
Yes, you're right. Thank you.
That's okay. You can still hear me, yes?
Yes, sorry.
So, yeah, so I'm the healthcare training manager for Down Syndrome UK. Oh, look at these hearts. This is the best lecture I've ever done. I love it. So I'm, as Abigail said, I'm the healthcare training manager for a national Down syndrome charity in the UK. I'm also a parent of a young chap with Down syndrome who you can see there, my son Billy. Next slide, please. I'm going to just give you just a brief overview of what we do as a charity. We're, as I've said, we're a national Down syndrome charity. We have a healthcare arm to our charity, which is called Positive About Down Syndrome, which is PADS, which you may hear me talking about later. We've been going, we're in our 10th year now of going. This picture here is of our CEO, Nicola Enoch, who set up the charity. And because there seemed to be big gaps in the way people, women were supported and families were supported when they were given the news that their baby has Down syndrome. So we've done quite a lot of research into how women were given the news that their baby has Down syndrome, which I'll go into in a moment. But we also collaborate in the UK with the Royal College of Midwives. We also collaborate with the Institute of Health Visitors and anybody really who comes in contact with families who have children with Down syndrome. So as Abigail said, Nicola and I are both part of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group, which is helping the movement of the Down Syndrome Act in England and trying to get the voices of people with Down syndrome heard in Parliament. Next slide, please. So we feel that our main role is we're championing the lived experience, and we do that by talking to our Down syndrome community, and we use those lived experiences in many ways. So we empower the parents so that they know that they're part of a strong and supportive community. We use that lived experience to educate professionals like yourselves. We use that lived experience to affect change, and hopefully we use that lived experience to also enlighten the public. Next slide, please. So we're a parent-led charity, and as such, we consider ourselves to be experts through experience. We understand what a good maternity experience should look like, and we're empowering our parents to ensure that they know what a good maternity experience looks like as well. So we believe that every family who has a child with Down syndrome can access all their health services without being subjected to any out-of-date attitudes surrounding Down syndrome or any negative language surrounding Down syndrome. And we work in the UK with local hospitals, universities, healthcare providers, anybody who, like I say, comes in contact with children with Down syndrome. We provide a lot of our resources. And the aim is to improve the experiences of everybody who has a child with Down syndrome. Next slide, please. Just to show you that we are a credible organisation, we do surveys of our parents. So PADS is positive about Down syndrome. We do surveys for our parents, our families, to make sure that we're providing them with the information that they need, and they use us as a means of support and information. And thankfully, our statistics are pretty good and they go up year on year. Next slide, please. So the Down Syndrome Act 2022 was one of the last things that our Queen signed off. The guidance has not yet been finalised, but I thought I would just share with you that although the guidance actually hasn't been published yet, the government have published an annex in association with this act, which signposts you to resources and examples of good practice. So this is on a national level, examples of good practice. And positive about Down syndrome and Down Syndrome UK have been cited in there about 27 times. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing in terms of trying to improve maternity experiences for women who have children with Down syndrome, but also support from that point, from the point of detection and onwards, supporting those families going forward. Next slide, please. As you know, Down syndrome is often screened for. I'm really sorry, I don't know what the screening is like in a lot of the countries outside of the UK. So maybe we could discuss that afterwards. But in the UK, Down syndrome is can be screened for. We have the non-invasive prenatal test, which it was just done privately, but it's now available on the NHS, has been for the last 4 or 5 years. There was a bit of controversy when this came out because the accuracy rate was well below the figures claimed by the private companies. They're saying that it was 99% accurate at detecting Down syndrome, which it isn't. So that kind of delayed the rollout of the non-invasive prenatal test. But as you may know, in the UK, over 90% of where Down syndrome is detected, over 90% of those pregnancies are terminated. Next slide, please. So the termination rate for Down syndrome is pretty high. And as an organisation, we were wondering, well, why is that? Well, we know that statistics show that parents, are generally okay with having a baby with Down syndrome. Siblings are not adversely affected by being a sibling of someone with Down syndrome. And people with Down syndrome themselves would say that they're happy with their lives. But still, the termination rate remains over 90% in the UK. Next slide, please. So we have found that perhaps there is an over-medicalisation of the condition, and sometimes context isn't provided. For example, heart defects are detected in around 50% of pregnancies of babies with Down syndrome. And what families are telling us they're not often told is that a lot of those heart defects may resolve in utero or when the baby's born, or those babies, those children live with those heart defects with monitoring, regular monitoring. And it's only a minority of cases that that require open heart surgery. It is still a significant minority. It's about 15 to 20%, but that surgery is very successful. Our children present with about 5 different well-known heart conditions, and the surgery is very successful. But we find that there's a poor use of language surrounding Down syndrome, and a lot of healthcare professionals have outdated information and stereotypes surrounding Down syndrome. Certainly, when I had my son Billy, I knew nothing about Down syndrome, and now I consider myself to be a bit of an expert. But I knew nothing about Down syndrome, and I'm ashamed to say I did have a very negative idea of what Down syndrome would mean to my son Billy and to us as a family. So I'm not blaming anyone. It's just out there. The society's idea of disability, I think, needs improving, but also that outdated idea of Down syndrome is still out there. Next slide, please. So what do parents worry about? These are very common feelings that new parents and expectant parents experience. And I have to say that I felt all of these. I don't want my other children to be a burden. What about the impact on our family? But statistics show that siblings of children with Down syndrome are not adversely affected statistically, and a lot of them actually go into caring professions. So that's a positive. They will never fit in. They will live with us forever. That's certainly something I worried about when I had Billy, that I thought this is the end of everything. We're going to have that eternal child. And the work that I do with the National Down Syndrome Policy Group is working with adults with Down syndrome to get their voices heard in Parliament. So we have lots of meetings and we just discuss lots of things. And I have to say that none of them want to live with their parents. And why would they? I didn't. So I don't know why I thought it would be any different for Billy. They want to live with their friends, with their spouses. They want to get married and they want to have jobs. They just want that ordinary life that we all have, really. Parents worry about coping with extra pressures, bringing in a disabled child into the world. And I think personally, within the UK, we're in quite a privileged position having a baby with Down syndrome because it is detected antenatally. Or very soon after birth, that support kicks in right at that time. We don't have to wait for a diagnosis. And because Down syndrome's been around so long, there's been such a lot of research into, the health conditions that they're prone to, the way that they learn, their learning profile, speech and language disorder, and all of those referrals should kick in quite quickly. So I feel like we are in quite a privileged position. I'm not saying there aren't extra pressures in bringing up a child with Down syndrome, but any parents of you in the audience know that bringing up any child comes with a lot of pressures. And I have 2 children, one with Down syndrome, one without, and they both have issues in terms of parenting them, but they are different. I think parenting a child with Down syndrome is different. It's not more challenging, I suppose, but it's just different. It's not less. It's just different. So, like I said, there is a lot of support when it comes to parenting a child with Down syndrome. So we do feel that we're in quite a privileged position. Next slide, please. So knowing that the termination rate is quite so high, we did a little bit of delving into why that is, and we've done 2 lots of research, 2 lots of published research, and I'm going to be telling you about the latest round of research that we've conducted. Next slide, please. Okay, so we funded a PhD student at Warwick University, and we facilitated a survey of our families. So we had 317 participants who had a baby with Down syndrome between the years of 2019 and 2022. The questionnaire involved how much support did they have with their decisions? Did they understand the options that were available to them in terms of screening? Were they able to make an intentional choice, and were they making that choice on their own terms? We also had asked them about what was it like when they received the news about Down syndrome and what support they had for their mental well-being. Next slide, please. So we found that when they were given the news that their baby had Down syndrome, whether that's a high chance screening result, whether that's an antenatal diagnostic result, or whether that's a postnatal surprise, and generally it is a surprise, very few of them were told that news in a positive way. And I guess we're looking more in a neutral manner, but certainly it shouldn't have been, that news should not have been given to them in a negative way. And you can see that the percentages are quite high in that respect. Next slide, please. We also found that our families are telling us that they felt they were given no support. 62% of families said they had no support, and 47% said they had no information surrounding Down syndrome. And often that could be at the time when they're making a decision whether to continue or not continue that pregnancy. Obviously, I mean, in the UK, a pregnancy can be terminated, and that has to be a woman's choice. But we would say it has to be an informed choice. And unless you're giving women the information that they need about the condition of the child that they're carrying, is it actually a fully informed choice? Next slide, please. So here's a summary of our findings from that round of research collaborating with University of Warwick. We found that 53% of women went along with screening without much thought as to the consequences if it did come back as a positive result. 21% felt pressured into screening, and obviously screening is an opt-in system. A lot of women didn't actually realise that, or they felt pressured to have screening. A lot of women saying they didn't have enough time to discuss the screening, and those that declined the screening were offered it again, sometimes more than once. Worryingly, 19% felt pressure to terminate, whereas none felt pressure to continue, and that's obviously something we're trying to avoid. And we found that if they decided not to have a termination, if they decided to continue their pregnancy, often they were offered termination time and time again. And in the UK, there is a Termination Act which allows termination up to term if Down syndrome has been detected. It is quite an archaic act, and thankfully, late-term terminations are not very common, but it does have an effect on the mental health of women if they're offered termination time and time again, sometimes quite late in the pregnancy. Next slide, please. So here's just a few examples from our families. The possibility of being pregnant with a child with Down syndrome was always framed very negatively by professionals. I was offered termination numerous times, even after we made it clear to continue. We felt as though the doctor was wanting us to terminate because he kept asking if we were sure and if we knew what we were letting ourselves in for having a child with Down syndrome. Even when we told him we were continued, he carried on talking about the whole termination process and how it worked. You can imagine how you might feel putting yourself in these women's shoes, that they are pregnant with a child with Down syndrome, and they want to know more information, but it's always been framed in a very negative way. I was asked multiple times if I knew my options. I felt clearly they wanted us to terminate our baby, which was horrible to have in the back of my mind every time I went for an appointment, that basically they'd rather our baby was dead. I mean, sorry, it's a bit brutal, isn't it? It made it very difficult to trust the professionals and made the pregnancy harder than it needed to be. Next slide. So you can imagine that would be the case if it was framed in such a negative way. So we asked our families, our women, did they feel that their mental health was supported? And we found that only 34% of our women felt that their mental health was supported antenatally, and that went down to 26% postnatally. And if you compare that to the most recent Maternity Quality Care Commission report of 2023, 85% of the general population felt that their mental health was supported. So that's 85% of women who don't have babies with Down syndrome compared to at its lowest point, 26. There's a big disparity there. And also our families have told us that 37% of them felt that the attitudes of the healthcare professionals had a negative impact on their mental well-being. This is where the out-of-date idea of what a life with Down syndrome is like, and it is affecting the mental health of women who are expecting babies with Down syndrome. Next slide, please. It does get more jolly in a minute, I promise you. So it is quite negative, but I just want to frame what a lot of women are going through when they get that Down syndrome diagnosis. So women will say to us, if only they'd realized that the words they use will stay with us forever. So if you're told, I'm sorry, I know this must be devastating news for you, that might affect your mental health and perhaps bonding with your baby. I mean, the far-reaching effects of negative language can be quite severe. For me, I was told I'm sorry by my GP, who I saw my first appointment. Having had Billy, she was sorry he had Down syndrome. And at the time, it didn't really mean much to me. But I remember walking home with Billy thinking, well, she's the senior member of the practice. She's sorry for me. So my husband must be sorry for me. My mum must be sorry for me. My friends must be sorry for me. And by the time I got home, I was sorry for me. I was sorry that I had the baby that nobody wanted. It really was a 10-minute walk home. My thoughts about him spiraled downward just from those words. I mean, not just from those words, but it contributed. So think about what I'm trying to say is just think about the words that you're using when you're talking about Down syndrome, because those words will stay with these families forever. Conversely, congratulations, your baby's beautiful. Very simply, those words will carry on with those families as well. They will carry on and thinking their baby is beautiful, as it obviously would be. But hearing those words makes a big difference compared to I'm sorry. And I know nobody's intentionally trying to upset anyone. I think it's just historically that's what people would have said, because in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, a life with Down syndrome was completely different to what it is today. I mean, a lot of babies with Down syndrome didn't live very long because they were denied a heart surgery, and it was thought that they couldn't learn. But now, because of all the research that we've had surrounding Down syndrome, it turns out they have a unique learning profile. And now we know that a lot of children, the majority of children actually with Down syndrome in the UK, go to mainstream schools with additional support and do very well, with those early interventions as well. So another quote, we think it's likely your baby has Down syndrome. There's a lot of support to help you as a family and even a great support group nearby. Positive words. And the person that said that knew what support was available. And that kind of just a very simple comment would make a really big difference to our families. Next slide, please. So we looked into support for parental well-being, thinking about the communication, making sure that the words that you use are positive, making sure that the partner's there to support or somebody is there to support when they're given the news, and think about the emotional support that you're able to provide. Think about being sensitive with the language you're using, offering hope and reassurance. Think about the psychological support needs of that woman and that family, and try and think about connections that you can make through signposting, reducing the sense of isolation. Certainly, I think, because I run a Down syndrome support group in South London, I think a lot of families think they're the only ones. They're the only ones who've got a child with Down syndrome, and sharing those experiences with other families that have gone through that a bit further down the line is a really we know from our surveys is making a really big difference to families. So here's a quote here. Someone talked about the fact that I'd chosen to continue my pregnancy and therefore I should be fine with having a child with Down syndrome, even though I was really struggling with the diagnosis. They didn't seem to appreciate that continuing the pregnancy doesn't mean that you're okay. It's a lot to process. This is something that we found with our families, that if they've been given a positive screening result or a diagnostic result, they're telling us that they feel a little left because they've been given that diagnosis, and so you're okay with that and off you go. So that's something that you need to consider, that even if they have been given an antenatal diagnosis, they still need that support and that emotional support. So this is a better quote. I was allocated a new midwife who supports more vulnerable pregnancies and mental health. She was able to see me at home and was able to be present for the birth and a month after the birth to support me. While she wasn't an expert in Down syndrome, having a more personalised and intensive support meant I was better able to cope and to be heard when I had concerns. So that's an example of a really good example of good practice. Next slide, please. So conclusions and implications from this research, in terms of supporting decisions, a personalised discussion to address any individual priorities, validating the option to decline the testing or to continue the pregnancy, not asking those questions, are you sure, are you sure? Making sure there's plenty of time for processing and decision making, and affirming those decisions to promote trust between you and that woman. In terms of receiving the news the baby has Down syndrome, think about the lasting impact of your communication, because good communication makes a massive difference. Think about realistic and balanced and practical information, and provide signposting, because we found that our families are saying talking to other families in this situation is one of the best things one of the best ways that they find support. Think about support for your parental well-being. Think of making sure that you're using sensitive language. If you can, checking in and follow up, and responding to any emotional support needs that woman needs. And again, facilitating connections to provide reassurance and let them know that they're part of a very fully supportive community. Next slide, please. Ooh. Okay, in the UK, one of the reasons we Nicola Enoch set up the charity was because we found, when we did our delving into the high termination rate, we found that there is a really good care pathway if you wanted to terminate your pregnancy. And until Down Syndrome UK was set up, there wasn't a care pathway if you wanted to continue your pregnancy. So we collaborated with Professor Baskett at St George's Hospital in London, and Down Syndrome Research Foundation to come up with an antenatal care pathway for continuing your pregnancy if Down syndrome is detected or suspected. I know that's very small. I'm going on to the next slide, and it will tell you what was in that pathway. Next slide, please. So within that pathway, it talks about the benefits of continuity of carer, the fact that babies with Down syndrome often deliver prior to 37 weeks, and that is because there is an increased risk of placental dysfunction. So extra monitoring and planning is recommended towards the end of the pregnancy. There is an increased risk of stillbirth if you go beyond 39 weeks. This is another reason why we were really keen to set up an antenatal care pathway, is that within our support network, we noticed within 1 month, there were, I think, 4 stillbirths within that same group, around 36, 37 weeks due to placental dysfunction. And we were wondering that if extra monitoring and planning, and perhaps not going beyond, well, we wanted to make it 38 weeks, I think, but Professor Baskey didn't agree to that. So 39 weeks, that perhaps those stillbirths may not have happened if this care pathway had been brought in a bit earlier. So it also talks about the importance of using unbiased language and having a positive attitude, and it mentions postnatal care and emotional support. So we find that this antenatal care pathway, although it's not mandatory, it is recommended to have it within your hospitals or something similar, because it improves outcomes not just for the baby but also for the mother. Next slide, please. Thank you. Think about the words that you're using, because as I've mentioned, it makes a real difference to families. So in terms of screening, please don't talk about risk. Don't talk about your screening test has come back high risk for Down syndrome or low risk for Down syndrome, because risk is associated with danger and peril and something terrible happening. So there are lots of alternative words like chance, possibility, probability. So think about really reducing the word risk. It really isn't recommended to be used in terms of Down syndrome screening. And if you're going to talk about these words, generally I put them in front of Billy. Is he an abnormality? No, he's my boy. Is he a problem? know, well, he's a teenager. It's a bit tricky at the minute, but it's not because he has Down syndrome. Is he a disorder? No, he's my son. He has a chromosomal difference. He has a condition called Down syndrome. And that isn't just me having a chip in my shoulder. It's we're talking to our community, and these kind of languages, this kind of use of language is making a real difference to them. So you're not breaking good news, bad news, or difficult news. You're sharing unexpected news. It probably is unexpected news. And I don't really like to add this to my training, but don't talk about normal babies. But and I'm sure you don't, but we're still having parents feedback to us that normal babies has been used. Recently, a mother told us that she was told that a normal baby would be easier for her and take up less of her time. So, you're talking about typically developing children and babies with Down syndrome. And what's really important to our community is always using person first language. Next slide, please. So you're always talking about babies with Down syndrome, people with Down syndrome, because if you're going to use Down syndrome before the person, Down's babies, Down's children, then as a community, we would say that you're dehumanizing our children. So never put the Down syndrome in front of the human. So always use person first language when you're talking about Down syndrome. That's my lovely boy there. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we are able to support family, which is PADS Positive About Down Syndrome, which is our healthcare arm from Down Syndrome UK, we have a whole load of online support groups from the point of diagnosis onwards. So we have Great Expectations, which is our pregnancy support network for women that have had a high chance screening result or a definitive diagnosis. And from there, they go on to new parents, they go on to preschool parents, they go on to primary school parents, and we're now going into secondary school. So this is a quote, is what helped me so much was falling across PADS, Positive About Down Syndrome on Facebook, seeing others' journeys and seeing others who are further in their journey gives you hope for your own. And whilst it doesn't hide the struggles, as people talk very openly, it gives hope for the future and the ability to overcome those struggles. Next slide, please. We have a whole range of publications that we give to local maternity units in the UK. You can ask for a couple of copies of our books and posters, but also the Nobody Told Me book we give to anybody that joins our Great Expectations group, or if they haven't joined that, they've got a postnatal diagnosis, we give them to new parents. So we've called it The Truth About Down Syndrome. It's real life stories, that lived experience. It's not a sugar-coated experience. It's real life experiences, and it's not just parents. We like to support grandparents where we are. We find that grandparents often have that outdated idea of what Down syndrome means to their grandchild. So we support grandparents in their sibling stories. And we're hoping we covered quite a lot of demographics in there, and most importantly, the aspirations of people with Down syndrome at the back of the book. So we also have a postnatal support group book, which we call the Little Orange Book of Knowledge, which is You Don't Know What You Don't Know, which is generally given out by support groups in the UK, but all of these can be accessed online. And in that Little Orange Book of Knowledge are things that parents need to know about having a child with Down syndrome, like when should they see a paediatrician? Why do they need an occupational therapist? Why do they need a speech and language therapist? When should they see them? And other milestones like teeth in children with Down syndrome come very randomly and very late. They're over a year old, and also it's got those other little things that will help them to alleviate their stress, really. So we also found that our families were telling us there was a real lack of support concerning heart surgery if they were expecting heart surgery. So we developed a heart buddy scheme where we buddy up families who are about to have a particular type of surgery at a particular hospital with a family that's already had that surgery at that hospital. So they get the practical support as well as the emotional support. And breastfeeding, we're very big on breastfeeding. We've done quite a lot of research into that because we found that a lot of women were telling us that they were told that their baby couldn't breastfeed just because they had Down syndrome, and that isn't the case. They may need a bit of extra support, and we have a breastfeeding coordinator who's able to give those handy hints to the parents, to the mothers, but also does this kind of training in terms of for infant feeding leads, how to support families who want to breastfeed their babies. And we have a publication giving handy hints and tips as well. Next slide, please. So in summary, what we want you to be is we want you to be positive when you're given the news that the baby has Down syndrome. We don't want you to panic if Down syndrome has been detected. We want you to be confident in knowing there's nothing to be sorry about by having a baby with Down syndrome. Obviously, each parent is different, so I can't help you with that, but at least be aware that if Down syndrome has already been detected antenatally, they may still have issues with having a baby with Down syndrome. So be supportive, signpost to the relevant sources of information. I put in there encourage photographs because a lot of our families are saying that when their baby was in the neonatal unit with an NG tube and maybe lots of machines going ping around them, they didn't want those pictures, and they weren't encouraged to take photographs. And so subsequently, they don't have any photographs of the baby's first 3 weeks of their life because they didn't think that they wanted those pictures. But it is really important. Never allow that baby to become a medical exhibit. Our families will tell us that although they've consented for students to surround them once they've had their baby, they didn't realize what that actually meant, having students around them, and they're often pointed out physical features and markers that they hadn't noticed, and it was a very negative experience for them. So also consider, I've already talked about your spoken language, but make sure that your body language and your spoken language are speaking the same language. So that's quite a handy hint there. Next slide, please. If you're in the UK, the Royal, we've as I mentioned, we collaborated with the Royal College of Midwives and have co-developed two of their iLearn modules, one about breastfeeding a baby with Down syndrome and one about care and consideration surrounding giving the news that a baby has Down syndrome. And we've had really great feedback from that. So do take a look at that. They're coffee time iLearn modules. They're only 10-20 minutes, I think. So they're quite a good resource if you wanted to know more about Down syndrome. Next slide, please. So I think this is my final slide. So really just ensure that parents have access to accurate and contemporary information about the lived experience of having Down syndrome, what life with Down syndrome is like in the 21st century. We would recommend, obviously, our Nobody Told Me book because we felt that before Down syndrome UK came along, the information that was given was quite negative and not very bright or encouraging or positive. It was more quite factual, but we feel that we're sharing that lived experience so that families know what to expect. Make sure that you have a contemporary understanding of what Down syndrome is like in the 21st century. Educate yourself and be informed, and make sure you know where best to signpost the families for support. Because as I've mentioned, that peer-to-peer support is part of best practice in terms of supporting those families. In addition, never allow panic in the room. Never ever be sorry. Always use person first language and be positive. Next slide, please. So as I've said, if you've got a contemporary understanding of what Down syndrome is like, today, and you've got that positive attitude, you will lessen that family stress and vastly improve their mental health. And it's as simple as that, I would say. Next slide, please. Just a bit of signposting from our point of view. Our website address is there. We have a section for professionals on our website, as well as all the signposting for families that you need to know, and access to our publications online is on there. And we also have monthly lunchtime webinars various subjects. I think our next one is for health visitors, how good signposting for health visitors. And next slide, please. Which I think is just email address for me if you have any questions that we don't have time for, or you've got anything you want to share in terms of best practice. We're always up for hearing about best practice, or if you need any support with any of your families, do drop us a line. And we have our own evaluation form, but I think the conference itself has its own evaluation form too, but we do act on any feedback we have. So hopefully I haven't offended anyone today, and you've found the time you spent with me a positive experience. So that's all I wanted to say, really. So if there is any time for any questions or comments, please speak up. Thank you. I see I'm getting lots of claps.
Okay, Lucienne, thank you so much. There are some questions in the chat box, so
Okay.
let me read them out for us to answer. So from Nabila, how can midwives better prepare families in rural areas and low resource settings? So this is a question from Nabila.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't really know what screening services are available in rural areas and low resource settings. I think that's not something I can really advise on. All I can say is that I can signpost you to how to support those families where Down syndrome has been detected. I know there can be some cultural perspectives surrounding disability and Down syndrome in particular, and certainly as an organisation in the UK, we can put families together of similar backgrounds, or if English isn't their first language, we can put families together so they can better support each other. But I don't really know how better to prepare them in terms of where blood tests are not available, but certainly there is a lot of support and assistance available if they do have a baby with Down syndrome.